Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another wonderful In Conversation episode. And today I want to target a very complex and super important topic, which is professional burnout. This is a very near and dear topic to me personally. I have a real life, personal, repeated experience with burnout. And you know, for the longest while, I've struggled to really understand why it happened in the first place and why it kept happening. But it had quite a dramatic effect on just my reality at that time and the decisions that I made to try to overcome this burnout. So things went how they went, and it's only now that I'm starting to really understand some issues for what they are. I just didn't have that knowledge and that insight at the time. So this is why I want to talk about this. And today, my guest is Siobhan Fox, and she kindly agreed to talk about burnout as well. So if you don't know me, my name is Lana, and I am a career strategist and coach with Two Steps Forward Consulting. And sometimes I get a mouthful just pronouncing my name. So what I do is I work mostly with professional women, mid-career professional women, to help them, to support them while they're going through some kind of a professional identity crisis. So even here, there's a huge overlap because a lot of the times burnout is a cause of that. But enough about me. I'm gonna let Siobhan introduce herself, and then we're gonna jump right into the questions.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Siobhan Fox. My business is Reveal Marketing. So you can probably guess by the name I have a background in marketing. And I now mentor small business owners to stop trading time for money, which I'm sure will come on to being a big reason for burnout, and also with their messaging and marketing strategy.
Wonderful. And I already see a lot of potential for, you know, us splitting this topic and maybe using both of our expertise to contribute to this type of conversation. I work with people that have been in the workforce, they're employees. I don't really work with people in leadership position. That is not my focus. So these are the people who go into work every single day trying to make something out of their career, very hardworking people. And so I'm familiar with burnout in that environment. And Siobhan has experience additional, well, obviously there's, she can speak to that sort of experience, but she can also speak to what happens when you've left the workforce and now you are starting a small business, you're an entrepreneur, and surprise, surprise, you still feel burnt out. So sometimes that is, you actually think that's the solution. You leave the workforce, but that may not be a solution. So I prepared some questions, and they have to do with actually trying to understand some issues, like try to understand why burnout happened and why repeated burnout happened specifically, and who is at risk for repeated burnout. So as I've mentioned, Siobhan and I both have some experience with burnout, and I know this from previous conversations with her. So I've spoken to many other people as well, and I know that this is a huge problem. Almost everybody at some point in their career experiences burnout, and most of those people struggle to understand what's really going on. And I also started noticing some trends that some people are actually at a greater risk for burnout. They're definitely more prone to burnout, and not just burnout, but repeated burnout. So I want to talk today about the people, this group of people that seem to be prone to burnout. I have my own opinion about the traits that they have in common, but I want to ask Siobhan about that.
Yeah, so I think people that are really driven and passionate are at a high risk. I know for myself, also being highly empathetic, because you end up drawing on the energy of the people around you, and you end up holding things together when other people are losing their minds, which is weirdly something I used to get criticised for. I used to get criticised for being too calm in a crisis. But what I didn't know I was doing was burning through a ton of energy to stay that calm and to keep things together. Yeah, exactly. And my recent discovery about the highly sensitive personality, I realised that I'm also a highly sensitive person. And what that means is that it makes me probably better at my job, better at dealing with people, because I'm more perceptive than your average person. But it also means that all of this perceiving, all of this analysing, all of this taking in external and internal stimulus means my brain fries itself on a regular basis, and the working world is not really set up to help us manage our energy and our mental health. Let's face it, more and more organizations are moving in that direction, but certainly my experience is just come here, do your work. I don't care if you're ill. You know, I don't care what's going on in your personal life, just get in here and do your work, and take all that personal stuff somewhere else.
I just wanted to also say that in my experience, people who are eager to please are also at a huge risk for burnout, and it's not just me. I thought about this actually for a long time and repeatedly throughout the last few years, ever since I started working for myself and actually trying to get in the head of the people that are having like serious issues with their careers, and they're starting to actually question all the decisions that they've ever made and starting to lose their identity, and they're unable to rediscover it. And I've found this group of people that, yes, they're highly sensitive, but also on top of that, they're extremely hardworking and they're eager to please. And this is especially true for women that have been brought up to, you know, be very proper. So maybe like the eldest daughter, or somebody who is just very studious. And like, I can speak for myself, I can't speak for everybody, but I've had a few clients that I've made the same conclusion about as for myself, is that I was brought up to be a very, very good student and very proper. And so I started associating hard work with rewards, and, you know, reverse engineer, what do I need to make somebody happy and get a good grade and get recognition. And this took me through high school and university. Undergraduate degree for sure, it was a bit different. It was more kind of resembled real world than grad school. But this sort of idea of adapting so much to your environment that you actually completely lose yourself in it. And you can't say no because you really don't think it's appropriate. You really don't know what to do in some situations, because, you know, this kind of very structured environment didn't prepare you for the unpredictability of professional environment and some of the issues like the dealing with people, the politics, not getting what you want, making sense of what actually is in the scope of your work. You know, I was in a situation once where I tried to volunteer to do something extra and I was actually shut down for that. And I've been brought to think that showing initiative is a good thing. And I thought that extra work will require extra reward. And that was absolutely not the case. So do you think that's it as well? Like trusting, eager to please people?
Yeah, and that can come from many different directions, like being eager to please, and also kind of next to that, like overgivers, people that are just constantly trying to look at like, what else can I do? And some of that can come from having a lack of confidence or having self-worth issues. Or like, I look back at my career now and I think, you know, all the crap I had to eat and all of the bosses I got bullied by and all of the crappy jobs I had to do, and the go and make the tea, and people that like don't even acknowledge you're in the room and treat you like rubbish. I kind of, the general feeling was that's what you had to go through to get anywhere in your career. And actually, how much was I part of that problem, because I never stood up for myself, or very rarely, because I had a lot of self-esteem issues. So I got trampled, but I kind of allowed myself to be trampled as well. So I'm really hoping that like that is going to shift, or is already shifting, you know.
I like the way you put it, because again, I can only speak for myself in this specific situation, but I kind of was brought up to not want to speak up for yourself, because there's an obligation to respect the authority. It is the authority that distributes the rewards, and you have to really, you know, kind of suppress your identity and do what they need you to do and be who they need you to be. And this is great. And I mean, there's clarity in that. It's just that over time, this is really becoming a problem, because as you become a fully formed adult and develop a stronger personality, you actually you get into the situation where you're at a huge inner conflict, and you start to look back at what you've been doing up to now, and then perhaps you even have enough wisdom to realize that you've been doing this wrong, and you start blaming yourself, and you start to really think that, why was I doing it all this time? Did I miss some opportunities? Maybe if I stood up for myself, maybe I said no in this situation. Like, you really start to doubt every single decision you've ever made. So in addition to being burnt out and out of energy and unable to move forward, you now are sitting on this pile of blame, self-blame, and that just makes it much more difficult to kind of turn things around, I think, to kind of say, okay, past is in the past. I need to come up with who I am right now, and I need to stick with this now, because now I have self-respect. Now I can handle this, right? So yeah, huge problem for me, definitely, over and over and over again. And when I finally broke out of my shell, it almost felt like I'm doing something forbidden. I felt it was so wrong. It was so unusual. And even though I'm like a really extroverted, outspoken personality, I've never tried anything like that at work. And then I started saying, no, this is not for me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fill in the goals in this Excel spreadsheet, because anything I actually want to put in the table isn't totally not what you want to see. And you will never allow me to do this. And somebody will probably say, you know, maybe we should part ways. It becomes very kind of exciting, but you do feel like you're doing something you're forbidden to do.
Yeah.
And I don't
in a way,
feel that way.
In a way, burnout is a gift, though, because if I look back at my career, it actually took a long time for me to get what I would really class as proper burnout, and I kind of skated across the top of it a lot. I got really close, but I never fully got taken out. I got migraines a lot, but that takes you out for a couple of days. And then you're fine again. Well, not fine, but you know, you go back into coping mode. And actually, it wasn't until I got fully taken out by anxiety that I actually, like you said, came out of my shell, like rediscovered myself and discovered that I needed to set boundaries and that I could, you know, was not going to accept certain things. But
yeah,
worse than burnout is skating on that line of it and then never really understanding that there's an issue. And a lot of it was like, I just thought that's how life was. I just thought you constantly felt like you wanted to throw up on the way to work, and that was just normal, you know?
I want to contribute with a short personal story to this, because I've always thought that, you know, maybe I'm just choosing wrong jobs. Maybe because I was so shielded as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, and because I've been in the school system for over 20 years, I just didn't know how real life worked. So perhaps I just didn't have the forethought and the foresight to choose the jobs that would be good for me, because I was focused on kind of, you know, how much money will I make and what kind of title will I get, and, you know, kind of like this dream of what this job will get me in the end. I didn't think about the fact that every day will become a struggle, that it will become like survival, getting through the day. In my case, I would switch jobs. This was my solution. I thought I went too far because my graduate degree was very different from my undergraduate degree. So I thought maybe a couple of years prior, you know, I made a mistake, and this path that led me to my first professional job, maybe I made a huge mistake there, and it just didn't belong there. But the thing is, every time something like that would happen and I would have this big identity crisis, like it would actually take me out. Like you said, it would take me out of the workforce for up till a year. And I would be soul searching and figuring out, do I start a small business? Do I just tutor and become a teacher? What do I do? Do I just change fields completely? And, you know, through knowing certain people, I would come up, or like people giving suggestions, telling me about their industries, just doing a lot of research, talking to people, I would realize that maybe there's hope in some other place. And I believe in transferable skills, 100% believe in transferable skills. So I would take my skills and just take them somewhere else. To say that maybe this just didn't work out, maybe, you know, and do this over and over and over again. So I've always thought, by the way, this happened like at least 5 times maybe. So I've always thought that there's such a thing as a wrong job for you. It's a huge misalignment. It's just an environmental issue. So you are somewhere where it just they're not making use of your skills. Your skills are just different from what you get to do. You're in the wrong position, or you're in the wrong environment, or you were put in touch with the wrong people. And essentially, it's some kind of an environmental issue. So in my case, it means being so excited about my first job, and then I couldn't wait to get out of it. 11 months later, I was thinking first day they would have to bring in security to drag me out. And then 11 months later, I was thinking how I'm going to make it through the day. I still have 2 weeks left or 3 weeks left. And it became so painful. And then I went into a different industry. I lasted longer, but at the end it just creeps up on you, And so maybe for me, there's no such thing as the right job, because I cannot be an employee. Maybe that is the real true misalignment for me. But I think a lot of people are not in this position. They cannot make any drastic changes, or they are not prepared to make drastic changes. So I want to actually talk about this. So wrong job versus right job. And is my conclusion correct that, associating, like blaming it all on the environment may not actually be addressing the problem? For me, it didn't address the problem. I imagine for other people, it may not address the problem. So what about folks like us? Why is it not the case that just switching a job can help? Is it me?
Yeah.
I guess that's my real question. Was it me?
I definitely had a similar experience, that at some point it just felt like everything went west, and I was like, okay, it's time to move on. It's time to find something else. And anything new, it's a bit like dating, isn't it? You go for an interview, right? And you fall in love with that job or those people or the idea of it, because you're never going to know what the reality is. And then you move in with them, you get into the relationship, and at some point you're like, and it is like relationships, because many people, not just me, like a lot of people I know, same with jobs, you go into something new thinking that you found something different, and it's going to be different, and you tell yourself all these things, but if you don't fundamentally change you, and if you don't face up to your stuff or change what's really going on in here, any amount of external stuff is never going to fix the problem. So it's why a lot of us end up going for people friend-wise and relationship-wise with similar traits, and then ending up in similar situations where you're like, oh, this isn't working. Because fundamentally, right?
You've got over and over again and expecting a different result.
Exactly. And most people don't realize that that work that you do, where you get to, you're never going to be like springing out of bed like I'm the best person ever and everything is unicorn farts and rainbows. But if you can get yourself to a fairly reasonable level, and you can understand your value system, and you can understand, if I go there and I spend 8 hours there, those 8 hours have to mean something. And I think that's the thing now, is most people want to work somewhere where it means something, where they feel like I'm making a difference, or that organization is different. And I think more people are wising up to, it's not about them interviewing me, it's about me interviewing them and going, are you right for me? By the way, I'm awesome. Like, instead of being like, please give me a job. And I think it's about breaking out of that pattern, isn't it?
So what can a person do? I guess if I want to leave this on some kind of constructive point. I know that for me, it was, like you said, realizing that I was actually doing the exact same thing over and over again. And that conclusion didn't come to me until literally just a couple months ago. I started this year by writing an article, and I was talking about my own experience with the struggle to find myself in my career, and constantly kind of struggling and realizing that just changing a job and trying something new isn't really going to solve it. And it was until just recently I realized that the changes I was making, the jobs I was going for, and the fields that I was entering, I wasn't actually doing anything very drastic. It's like, I think I called it, it's like exchanging a box for a larger box. To me, it felt very brave. And actually a lot of my peers would come up to me or write to me and say, you're so adventurous, you're so brave, you're trying all these new things. But my everyday reality was that, like you said, I would go into the job and it would be all fresh and new. And then the same issues would creep in. And, you can talk about the environment. Obviously, environment contributes, because there's some places that are more stressful than others. And the stress is a very dangerous beast because it affects your mind and your body. For me, it's neck pain, multi-day headaches, my back seizes up, my ears start ringing much louder than they normally do. And then there's the prolonged stress is extremely dangerous, because it's one thing when it affects your professional life and you can kind of put a boundary around that and say that, this is a work-related problem. I'm going to try to fix it with work-related solutions. But if you're the kind of person that was just unfortunate enough to also, on top of that, experience some problems in your personal life or something else, you actually completely lose control, because now you have stress in all aspects of your life. And this is definitely affecting your brain. And I've been looking a lot into this because I suffer from clinical depression, or you can phrase it as I'm the winner of clinical depression. And you can see that as a problem. You can see it as actually your body saying enough is enough. You really have to try something different. Everything you've been doing is actually a variation on a theme. It's not going to solve your problem. So I don't know, my approach to work actually agrees with what you just said. My approach to work became that I have to have more than the surface level understanding, like more than just a little bit of meaning, more than just a little bit of agreeing with what the project is about and tolerating it. And yes, I'm hardworking and I take pride in what I do, but that's just not going to be enough. And only recently I realized that every time I left a job was because I did not care about the project. I found it fun to work on it because I get to learn something new, but that would evaporate after a little while. And all that I would have left would be that, am I making some rich corporation richer? Am I, making mindless entertainment for somebody else? Like, what is it, the search for meaning is obviously a complicated thing. And the older you get, the more kind of pressing, the more urgent it becomes to align yourself with something, with some kind of cause that is deeply personal, because otherwise you just don't see the point of doing the work. But what about, like, is there anything that we can advise a person in terms of like daily habits to avoid burnout? I'm not very good with daily habits because I start with good intentions and then everything just falls apart within a couple of days. I have struggled keeping the routine. And in fact, having a routine is unpredictable for me, because on some days it's a blessing, on some days it's a curse, and I feel like I have a very structured, boring life and I have to escape from it. So, like, have you found any kind of like good suggestions that seem to pay off for people, maybe for entrepreneurs that you work with? Like, what are the daily habits?
Definitely finding a way to check in with your energy levels and being really honest with yourself, and realizing that if your body is telling you something, like you've got a headache or something hurts or you feel crappy, or that is a message, it's not something to be ignored. And actually, maybe it's just become automatic, it's become a habit, but every day when I get up, there is a process where I kind of go, where are we? Are we a 5 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10? And then I will change my schedule to match that, and reschedule things or make different decisions about the tasks that I do. And instead of working against myself, I work with the energy that I've got and I make the most of it. So I kind of do that daily, but then also it's about how you structure your day and having boundaries. So I only do client work and calls in the morning, and then I do I work on my business in the afternoon, because that's how I get the best out of my brain. And I like the long, endless afternoons where I can just sit and create content or write things or come up with ideas or work on my strategy. And I think working, we all have like a circadian rhythm, we all have an energy rhythm, and knowing what that looks like on average and then what that looks like on the day, finding ways to tune in with it and work with it is really valuable. And I do work on that a bit with my clients, because a lot of it always comes back to permission. It's like, give yourself permission to move that call. Like, the world won't end, nothing will go on fire, give yourself permission to push that deadline back or to change that thing. And actually, it's so powerful.
Maybe that's what it is the feeling that you're carrying the world's weight on your shoulders, and that things will fall apart if you are not there, even for a day, even for a couple of hours. And not giving yourself permission to be a human being, to be an adult, to be, a partner, a parent, a sibling, whatever you need to be in that moment, having personal obligations, Obviously that's going to clash with some of the work that you're doing, because life doesn't just wait for you to take a break. You know, people don't just, things don't just happen on your lunch hour or after work. Things are going to happen when they happen. And this is more difficult to do when you work for somebody else. I find that you really start buying into this idea that, oh my God, I have to do this. I have an obligation to get this done or else. And it's kind of just maybe not understanding that these consequences, the way you perceive them, are in your head.
Yeah.
And maybe even kind of developing that self-confidence when you do your check-ins with the supervisor, to say that I'm constantly concerned that you're going to be mad at me. You know, this may come off as really bizarre coming out of your mouth, because maybe you never imagined saying something like that. But once you actually acknowledge, or maybe just mentally acknowledge, maybe if you really don't feel like this is appropriate and you can't bring yourself to say that to somebody else, at least mentally acknowledge that perhaps the way things feel, perhaps the reality as it appears to you, isn't actually what it is.
Yeah.
And definitely not how it appears from the other side, because two different people have two completely different opinions and feelings about what's going on. So I just want to point out to people that the idea that it's not working out here and I will simply go somewhere else has a high chance of not protecting you from burnout the next time around. There are things, the systemic problems in the workplace when you work at a company of a certain size. It may be specific to your industry, it may be specific to just the size of the company, and just tends to happen. The thing is, it's always going to be there. So just, you know, switching, especially if you stay in the same industry, switching one job and going to a competitor is probably not going to solve your problem. Yeah. And I like what you said before about you really need to sit down and think about things. It's not, it can be solved. You can protect yourself to a degree, of course, from this kind of really bad reaction to stress. But you have to really think about it, and then you have to, I guess, learn to recognize it. Very, very.
And you have to choose to feel differently. Like you said, you have to choose how you react to stressful situations. You have to choose to get more information and to take a breath and find out what's really going on before you have that knee-jerk reaction. And recognize that you are an awesome human being, but you are a human being. You are not a computer.
Absolutely. I guess don't compare yourself to other people. You simply can't, and the older you get, the more people's paths diverge. So you can't compare yourself in any possible way to another person when you're just another adult. You know, maybe, even if you knew that person back when in high school, when your experiences were almost exactly the same, everything is different, and you really need to think for yourself. But as far as choosing the right job or the wrong job, it's not that simple. It's simply not that simple. I had a couple of talks before where I was more like a listener, and this one I felt like we were both participating, so it was like really fun for me, and it was really engaging, and I hope people really enjoyed watching it. So thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful end of the week. Bye.